Yes, just turn it.
Hi, everyone. It's me again. Wow, that film really wrecked me. I hope you all enjoyed. Anyway, over the next few minutes, we are going to learn and discuss the issues raised in the film with a Q&A featuring Chris Mosier, executive producer of the film, trailblazing Hall of Fame athlete, All-American duathlete, a 6-time member of Team USA, founder of Transathlete.com, and the first known transgender man to make a men's U.S. national team, and the catalyst for change for the International Olympic Committee policy on transgender athletes. At the JCC, we are committed to tackling tough issues as a community in an environment of civility and respect. So we please ask that you keep this in mind when we engage in this discussion. And now I'd love to welcome Chris. So honored to have you here today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for this incredible, incredible film.
Yeah, thank you. I've seen it a couple of times now, and I'm also wrecked.
Glad I'm not the only emotional one here. Anyway, I'd love to start out by asking you to please tell us a little bit about your story and what led you to eventually produce the film.
Yeah, sure. I came out in 2010. And so coming up on 10 years now, and have seen the landscape of sports change greatly. When I came out as a trans man, so I was raised and socialized as female, grew up playing girls and women's sports, and I've been living here in New York actually, and was competing in running races and just starting off in triathlon. And I had this moment where I did my first triathlon and I won, but I was too embarrassed to tell people that I won because it was in the women's category. And that was sort of the moment where I realized I had to do something about my identity, but I was terrified to lose my ability to compete in sports. And so I delayed my transition for over a year and a half because I didn't want to no longer be able to compete as an athlete. When I finally made a decision and transition, my entire life got better. Not just like my own comfort with myself, but also my ability to compete actually got better because I stopped worrying about what people were thinking about me when I was training and racing, worrying about what other people might be thinking at the starting line and things like that, and was able to focus all of that energy and effort into my training and racing. 2015, I made the U.S. national team, challenged the International Olympic Committee, and have been an out advocate ever since.
It's incredible. What do you say to people who argue that trans athletes should not be allowed to compete?
I think there are so many good lines in the movie. Like just so many people to shout out. First, like Nagazi makes great points when she's talking about Andrea about and the Connecticut administrator too. You can't treat someone like a girl from 8:30 to 2:30 and then tell them they have to be someone else for sports. I think that particularly for young people, all young people should have the right to participate in sports in accordance with their gender identity in a way that is safe and comfortable and affirming for them. Because we know that young people get so much out of their participation in sports. So I think it's really important to think about it like Coach Brian says, it's much bigger than the competition.
And what do you hope that audiences take away from the film? What are your top 3 takeaways?
I think the reason that I wanted to make this film was to humanize our stories, right? So for me as a trans man, I have a lot of privilege. And particularly as a white trans man, as someone who is perceived to be straight, I'm queer, but perceived to be straight. So, a straight white man and a trans man, but people don't give me a hard time in sports for the most part. And I've definitely had issues of discrimination, but by and large, my experience is very different than the young women in the film. And it's very different than a person of color in sports. And so I think it's important that we highlight those stories of these young people to really humanize them, because the only things that we're hearing, and we started making this film 2.5, 3 years ago, and so we were kind of on the edge, and it has never been more relevant than it is today watching this film, because of the things that are out there, the bills, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. But I wanted people to see young trans people and know that they are people. Like, when you see Mac with his family, like, he's just a kid. When you see Sarah Rose with her girlfriends doing makeup and talking about boys, like, she's just a teenager like other teenagers. And I think it's really important that we show that instead of how we demonize transgender people in society, and now, again, more than ever.
Yeah. Speaking of the relevance, how have you seen things change and evolve, even since this film was made just so recently? I know that so far in the 2020 legislative session, I think there's been over 19 bills that have been filed in 11 different states that are trying to limit the rights of trans people.
Yeah, and 7 of those states are specifically targeting high school student athletes, and one of them is actually New Hampshire. New Hampshire has one of the worst bills out right now that says that they want to deny the ability for young transgender people to participate authentically with their identity. And I actually just read today that it's not just for high school student athletes, but it's also for middle school and college student athletes as well. And I'm not sure how that would work, but Sarah Rose fought so hard for those protections, and now we have a bill like this on the table. And in 6 other states that I know of, is it 7? 7, thank you. 7 states, and they're targeting young high schoolers, like transgender high schoolers. So, some of the states out there who have medical bills want to make it a felony to provide affirming treatment for young transgender people. And it's said a number of times in the film, but this is literally a matter of life and death. Like, for me personally, even as an adult, I transitioned at 29. I had 2 choices. It was either be a transgender person or no longer be here. Those were the 2 choices that I had when I got to that point in my life. And so, for us to deny ability to participate with their peers, for us to deny medical services and opportunities to young people just because they're transgender it should be a crime.
Yeah, it's so terrible. And as we see, this situation seems to be getting worse in some cases. Mm-hmm. How would you suggest, or what are some items you would suggest we as a community can do to fight back and to help?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we remember that this is not just about sports, that this legislative session, these bills, these are gateway bills. This is the entry point for further discrimination against transgender Americans in areas of housing and employment and medical care, and we're seeing all of those pieces kind of come together now. But if we allow this to happen in sports, this will be the starting point of a complete loss of rights for trans people. And so whether you identify as trans or non-binary, gender expansive, or you identify as cisgender, straight ally, it is important for folks to use their voice to spread the word about these bills, because people aren't talking about them. And it's terrifying that we are in a position where things like this might be passed overnight, and we could wake up and have that loss of rights. And again, you see in the film the news clips that we see, and just how heartbreaking it is to kind of get that snapshot and that replay of what the last 2 years has been like for trans Americans. Actually, what since 2016 has been like for trans folks in this country. And it's not just trans folks, it's many, many marginalized communities who will be on the chopping blocks if things like this pass. So for information about sports, I encourage you to go to my website, which is transathlete.com, to get information about policies. Follow trans folks on Twitter and Instagram for news and information and updates. For youth sports, definitely follow GLSEN, GLSEN. And GLSEN has a great sports project and also does so much important work for LGBTQ+ folks who are young people. And, they're the folks who are actually doing that work on the ground. Trans equality, there are many organizations, the list here that was on the end, and you are emailing out folks a list of resources. So we'll make sure that you have clickable links to go to so that you can both be informed about the policies that are out there, but also please spread the word about them, because it's so important that not just trans folks are talking about this. I'll tell you, it is extremely tiring to constantly advocate for yourself all the time. And anybody who's been in that position, anyone who identifies as a woman in this room, anybody who is a person of color, anybody who is a religious minority, anybody who is in the situation where you have to advocate for yourself, you know how exhausting that is. And to be in a position now where we have young people who have to advocate for themselves, it's heartbreaking. So now more than ever, we need to stand up. We need to say something. We need to speak out, and we need to contact legislators. We need to spread the word, say that this is not okay. We will not stand for this type of discrimination against children.
Yeah. Just as Chris mentioned, and I mentioned previously, now that you come to a JCC event and we have your email, we will be sending you lots of emails, but including an actual tangible email with ways you can get out there and with resources that are available, and to really take action. Anyway, I think we have some time for some audience questions.
Hey, Chris, congratulations on the film. I had a question, and I'm not sure if you can answer this, but I'm wondering why the director chose not to include any interviews with any of the cisgender teammates of the three. I felt like it was a huge lost opportunity to hear. I mean, athletics is such team-based, and I really wanted to hear from all of the teammates, and pro and con on either side. Do you know why, or do you know if any of them were interviewed?
I think that we probably have a part 2, part 3, part 4 worth of footage on the chopping block floor to figure out how to craft the story in a way that you notice it was not policy focused, right? We're not talking about the policies beyond letting you know what they are and why this is an issue, but we're not going into the all 50 states policies. We're not going into things like that. We had some of those interviews with the parents, which we thought were more compelling, even though they're so excruciating to watch, except for the woman who says that you have to have your period in order to race, which I think is just a great moment of levity. But, I think for the young people, we didn't want to get into a position where we're debating whether or not they belong. And, we could have been selective and highlighted folks, but I think it was really important to stay on message with allowing them to tell their stories and not allowing their stories to be told through the eyes of their cisgender teammates, because it's being told that way through the media. And we really wanted to empower the young people and their families to be in charge of the stories. Yeah. Thank you.
I loved Chelsea, in addition to the 3 athletes, and I don't know if you have any follow-up on her.
The only follow-up I have is that she did not get her scholarship, which we said in the film, but I'm not sure if she continued to wrestle. I thought she was such a great addition. The first time that I saw her pop up in there, I was like, "Well, wait a second, who is she? Like, and why? Like, why is she in there?" But some of the things that she says about no young person is transitioning to gain athletic advantage. And that's, laughter, but that's really one of the things that the media says, against transgender athletes. And I will assure you, no one is transitioning for athletic glory. There's not a gold medal in the world that would offset what these young people are facing. So I think she was a great perspective. And she was sort of that blend between the teammates, another young person's perspective, and also someone who sort of helps us highlight a little bit of that part where people feel for her, right? Because she is not able to win in that situation, no matter how hard she tried, she said. And it really goes to show how Texas did a disservice to all athletes. Yeah.
First of all, the film is fantastic. But if you have other footage and you're thinking about doing other things, I appreciate the extent to which you wanted the kids to speak for themselves. But this country needs to hear from those parents and that grandmother. That grandmother should get a national award and be on television every day. She's just unbelievable. And it's a real message. And she clearly, I'm serious, she clearly could talk to parents and grandparents about lots of things other than just trans, because she just understands what it's like. She's amazing.
Thank you. One of the beautiful things is, as we filmed it over time, I think it was really important for us to see as the audience, her and Roy struggle with the pronouns, right? And it's not, people don't always get it right. And we're not trying to portray like these perfect families. There are struggles with all of these young people. And I thought that they were such essential characters, especially when he goes and fills up that Diet Coke. Oh my goodness. That and the dog jumping is where it really he breaks the mood for you, right? Yeah.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions.
Great film. Thank you for that, for sharing this message. So 2 thoughts. One was, again, the parents and the grandparents were so powerful, particularly that image of the grandma running behind her grandson. It was just so moving. Do you find that with trans athletes, younger students, that they do have supportive parents or guardians behind them, or were these examples kind of rarities? And then also, what would be your ideal way to communicate to other parents and other people in the high school athletic community to have better understanding and to humanize, like you were saying, so there wouldn't be such aggression and hate coming to these students?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say how many parents are out there supportive. Ideally, every parent wants to see their kid thrive. And, when you're in that position of having either a dead child or a trans child, you hope that they will choose the trans child, right? We had selected, I want to say 6 to 8 athletes that we were thinking about profiling, and having the parental support for us to film young people was pretty essential in our film. And I think even we see the struggles with Mac's family in particular about there was acceptance, there wasn't acceptance, and we hear her talk about that struggle. So I think that kind of shows another side. It's not just like Sarah's parents, I feel like, are super on board, right? Like from the jump, they were like, yes. I think it's really important for us to have education, like you said. So for coaches and parents and administrators, and we're not seeing the problem with acceptance in the schools as much as we're seeing the parents and the coaches and the fans having a problem accepting our transgender athletes. And in the language that they use and their conceptual understanding of what it actually means to be transgender, that's where we need to bridge the gap. We need that education so that people understand that people aren't transitioning for advantage and what it actually means to be a trans young person. I think films like this are certainly helpful. I think there are plenty of resources out there online that folks could have. But I think more than anything, that humanizing element is so essential. Like, when I first came out, if you compared 2 statistics side by side, more people in America believed they had seen a ghost than knew a trans person in real life. So I was going into situations where more people believed they had a paranormal experience than met someone like me. And for many people, even now, when I speak across the country at high schools and colleges and corporations, I'm the first trans person that a lot of people meet in real life. And there's something about having a conversation with someone, hearing them give a speech or talk that kind of helps. I think this film really helps just kind of go, wait a second, let me think about this, right? All these preconceived notions that I had, I'm reading Twitter headlines, I'm seeing news clips, none of that is actually the reality of what I'm hearing right here. And it helps people start to form different opinions. So my hope is that more people will expose themselves to positive stories like this to help them gain a better understanding about what it means to be trans, and we can start to see policy change and more acceptance and support for young people in sports.
We're done here.
Hi, so I'm actually from out of town from Dallas, and I went to high school with Mac. So I kind of saw all of this happening in real time, and all I could be is just angry, seeing all of the media and everything like that, and then how it was affecting him as a person because I went to school with him. And then I was also a trans athlete at the time, so I was terrified. So I just first wanted to say thank you for telling that story in such a beautiful way and in a way that like really humanizes the trans kids and like shows how horrible the media was, but then how much it affected them because it is a very real thing. So then my question is, with being a trans person telling other trans stories, were there any ways that you like better understood your own identity or the way that trans people live in America by through looking at those stories so closely?
Yeah, I think especially seeing it through through the lens of Sarah Rose and Andrea, because that level of discrimination, like Andrea faces, has not been my experience. Like, I came out in 2010, I was in the New York Times in 2011, I got a shrug, you're gonna be a middle of the pack guy, go have fun, right? And I was like, angry. But I wasn't getting harassed in the same way. I wasn't getting people yelling at me at competitions. 2015, I made the national team, I got a bunch of press about it, and I got a lot of like shrugs. Like, he's a guy who's not going to be a threat to other guys. And making Team USA a second time and a third time. And every single time is like, okay, like people don't believe that I can do it again. And when I see, seeing the story of that experience in sport through Andrea's experience was really enlightening for me. And then I think a lot of it didn't change my perspective. It really just like dug up a lot of old wounds for me as well. And every time that I watch it, when I see Mac go through the comments, it's just so like I physically feel that when he's reading that. Like, there are a couple of painful parts of the film for me, but I think they're so essential to the overall arc of the story. So and every time I watch it, I'm just super, super proud that we can tell the story of these young people in a way that is just, so uplifting and positive and true to them.
Thank you very much, Chris, for being here with us and for being such an amazing activist.
Yeah, just have to say, we still do not have distribution for this film, and every single film festival that we have gone to, we have won the Audience Choice Award time and time again. People love this film. I hope that you all loved it too. But if you have any connections to distribution, we really want more people to see this. And so, like, this needs to be on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon. It needs to be out there for other people. So please hook it up.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us and being a part of this very important conversation. Conversations and films like these are happening throughout the rest of the weekend, so please come back and join us for other films and activities through Monday. And stick around for our next film tonight, which is Slay the Dragon, which is another wonderful film.